People, will often ask me, what's the number one thing that I have to be resilient? I'm the author of this book, The Resilience Breakthrough, and people always ask me, what's the key ingredient to resilience? Lots of thoughts go through my mind, but I always emphasize that, resilience is the ability to bounce back, and resilience has never, ever showed up without some type of suffering, some type of opposition. So the number one thing you have to be resilient is suffering. It's something to bounce back from. And we know there's been no shortage of that the last few years. I wrote the book, The Resilience Breakthrough, a couple of years before COVID hit, and I had no idea what was going to shake out over the next few years. And it has been fascinating, traveling across this country and many places, talking about the subject matter of resilience. And I think it's universal. We all need it. You're going to hear a lot of my, talk today is going to be geared towards students, but I also want to emphasize that when I share anything about resilience, it's for all of us. Us as adults need resilience just as much. I know I need resilience. The last 3 months, I've needed tremendous resilience. I tore my knee ligament, my house flooded, and I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Now, the good news is I am off of insulin. I got some tremendous help, some tremendous advisors, and they got me back in top physical condition. So I've been talking about resilience, for many, many years. I always tease people and say, never write a book on resilience. You'll definitely, the universe will say, okay, here's some challenges to bounce back from. So you kind of curse yourself if you write a book on resilience. But the good news is between my house flooding, my house is okay now, and my knee is working great. And I'm not on any diabetes medication. So I'm fighting the fight. So I feel like no hypocrisy here on the subject matter of resilience. So I want to start out by sharing how I got interested in resilience so much and share a little bit of my background, my life story. I know a few of you out there probably have heard my life story a little bit, but I want to just play a little clip here from my life. This is part of a documentary being made on resilience. We're showing tons of examples of resilience, and the documentary made a little part of my story. So I want to just play my part of my story for you real quick, and you'll see why I became interested in the subject. A little interesting side note, as you watch the video, my blood sugar levels were at 730. You're supposed to be like in a coma at that time. And but I think because I grew up exposed to a lot of sugar, I made it through. But what's interesting is from the time that this video was taken, my life has completely changed. You'll notice that I'm in perfect physical condition now. I'm just kidding. But you'll have to have that in the back of your mind as you're watching this video here. So I'm in a resilience mode here. Here we go. I grew up in between Baltimore and DC in a family of 12 kids, 5 brothers, 6 sisters. Both my parents had some mental health challenges. My mom had social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, had a fear of leaving the house. You have to leave the house to get food. So there wasn't a lot of food to eat sometimes in my house growing up.
I don't tell anyone, but my dad was one of the highest level code breakers at the National Security Agency. You could give my dad any mathematical problem and he could instantly rattle it off the top of his head. My dad was autistic. He was a genius, but he had very little common sense or social skills. If you've ever seen that movie, A Beautiful Mind, you've met my dad.
So having 2 parents with some mental health challenges put me in a situation where I ended up being a street kid. I could hang out till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on a school night, had very few rules, very few boundaries. One night, I was out late at night and a car pulls up and I hear a voice. And the voice I hear is the voice of a woman who I endearingly call Mama Jackson. It was one of my best friend's moms who sees me out there, late at night.
Christian had so many obstacles that was going on in his home.
She knows what I'm out there doing, and she says, look, don't you ever set foot on our property. I'm going to call the school tomorrow. I'm going to make sure you're not in any of Sean's classes. I remember thinking to myself, dang, I know I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. I can never go to school with him ever again.
When you see a child that's hungry, there's no happiness there. You're thinking about what other kids have.
Going to school was very difficult for me as a child that was diagnosed with ADHD, conduct disorder, and severe learning disabilities. When I was sitting in a classroom, oftentimes, I was embarrassed. When I got called out loud, I would act up and get in trouble instead of embarrassing myself because I didn't know how to read or didn't know how to do basic math. So, you know, for me, it was like going to the doctor's office every day, going to school. You know, I had a hard time telling time when I was even 17 years old. I couldn't tell time on a hand clock. To me, a quarter to 5 equals 25 minutes to 5, but they tell me a quarter is 15.
When we concentrate on that more to make sure that a child's needs are provided for, then that child will thrive. I know that I'm loved, and I know that this person is going to feed me.
Mama Jackson took over and said, look, if you start going to school every day, I want to see your report cards. If you start answering to me, you can come eat in our house anytime you want. Now, Mama Jackson was a seriously, seriously good cook. That's one of the reasons why I'm in top physical condition right now. But anyways, I was very blessed to have Mama Jackson come into my life. It was kind of an informal foster care situation. She took over and really started giving me skills of resilience. It had a huge impact on my life. And I'm excited to share with you all the different skills and strategies that Mama Jackson gave me to help me become resilient.
One of his teachers in high school said to him that he would never go to college. Christian went to college.
Growing up in between DC and Baltimore, I saw many social problems in my community, in my neighborhood. You know, I saw poverty, I saw hopelessness at times. I even saw some violence. But I remember walking to school one morning and literally seeing one of my best friends evicted from his house. His furniture was all throughout his front yard. I could see the heartbreak in his eyes, his parents' eyes. And I knew in that moment, I wanted to be a social worker. And I knew I could not become a social worker unless I went to college. You know, but I was told college was probably not going to be an option for me with a 6th grade math level, a 7th grade reading and writing level. You know, statistically, I had a better chance of playing the NBA and becoming LeBron James.
His experience was at the other side of the track. Life was different. Life was unique. And the kids like that, they have to survive.
I struggled getting through college math. You know, college math is a requirement to make it through school. I remember that feeling in my stomach when I knew I couldn't graduate.
They're not going to let me graduate because I can't do math. I can't count money. I can't numbers. I get confused and all of these things. He was like a bobcat in a cage.
So I came up with something called the No F game plan. And this was a strategy that I used to make it through school with my learning differences.
He made himself big. He made himself known to others. I'm here. Hey, I may not have what you have, but I have a street smart.
I would go to every class. I would sit on the front row. I would do all the homework assignments. And I would do enough extra credit to get a D minus. I would shoot for A's, but I learned in college you get just as much credit with a D minus.
And his paper is not polished. Other students get an A. Christian gets B, sometimes a C.
Trying to see.
But he has ideas. He has a substance. And the Why Try program that he ran with, and helped incredible number of students and the teachers and administrators came out of a classwork.
He created an environment to teach teachers how to really deal with students that may have significant functional limitations.
I persevered. Luckily, I knew what resilience was. I knew how to take my academic challenges and use them as a reason to knock down barriers, to focus on what was right with me, not what was wrong with me.
The vision of Why Try. And I think this thing is called the roller coaster ride. And I'm so glad that when he fell off of that roller coaster, he got back on.
Dr. Virgil Wood, civil rights icon and close friend to Dr. Martin Luther King, learned about Why Try's impact and decided to honor Mama Jackson with the National Rosa Parks Save the Children Award. Mama Jackson gave me a safe and loving environment so I could thrive.
She didn't get rid of my problems at home, at school, in my neighborhood. She showed me how to use those problems as a fuel source to put one foot in front of another and create a productive outcome with the opposition. Despite my many challenges, I was able to get a master's degree with a 6th grade math level and a 7th grade reading and writing level, and become a licensed clinical social worker. As a social worker, I was able to see the challenges that I faced growing up from a completely new perspective. I turned these insights into a program to help students reliably answer the question, why try? In this process, I discovered 4 powerful sources of resilience. I want to share those insights with you today.
It's interesting seeing your life story play out in a little documentary like that. It's so strange. As you can see, I have a huge debt to pay from being mentored by incredible civil rights icons, incredible people like Mama Jackson. I can mention many more people, but I've been really blessed. I've had the opportunity to go 7 million miles around this planet and meet many, many people. And what I learned from that, one, that we are far more similar than we are different. That's something I knew as a child growing up, raised in an African-American home. I picked up on that pretty early in life. And then just the incredible experience of, again, I have a huge debt to pay because of the tremendous mentors that I've had. The professor you saw there, Dr. Mike Seipel, comes to me and says, look, Christian, do me a favor, write down for me on a piece of paper. It's about 25 years ago. He says to me, write down, how'd you make it through school with your background, your learning disabilities? He was pretty much saying, you're the dumbest person to make it this far on our college campus. And he's like, look, just how did you do this? So I wrote down a few principles on a piece of paper. I wrote down, I had to stop crashing. And I'm going to spend like 5 minutes on this. And I'm going to jump right into the resilience. These are the skills of resilience, but I want to give you context to where resilience really was born out of. We put over 3 million students through these 10 visual metaphors, and we succeeded with many of these kids, and we failed with far too many of them. So I want to share with you what we learned from that. I put one of the largest social and emotional programs in America's education system, and we learned a lot from that, but we also realized there was something very important that we had to do in combination with teaching these skills. So this first picture here just talks about your decisions having consequences. The name of our program is Why Try? Because we believe if you try in life, you'll have more opportunity, more freedom, more self-respect. 25 years ago, I'd ask students, what's the answer to the question, why try? They say, I don't know. And I would say, okay, look, at the end of the day, I'm going to make sure that you know the answer to the question, why try? If you try in life, you'll have more opportunity, more freedom, more self-respect. And so the goal of these visual metaphors is to get them on that track right there to opportunity, freedom, self-respect. The loop represents the problems they keep doing over and over again. The roller coaster starts out, they go up, they have a rush, and then boom, they come down and crash. So to get on that track right there to opportunity, freedom, self-respect, we want them to tear off their labels. Often when we first work with students, they have 3 or more of these labels, failure, druggie, learning disabled, dumb, lazy, rebellious, attitude problem, troublemaker. We partnership within helping them tear off their labels, how to control their defense mechanisms. When I was in school, the teacher would say, Christian, turn to page 130 and read out loud. I didn't know how to read. So I'd say F you to the teacher, punch the kid next to me, because I'd much rather be sent to the principal's office for acting out behaviorally than having 30 kids falling out of their chair laughing at me because I don't know how to read. Today I realized, why was I doing that? I had no control of my defense mechanisms. This next picture here just talks about life's problems being like water. Water can flood and do damage. I just had over $30,000 worth of damage in my house from a flood. You have to drink enough water to stay alive. It's our best friend or it's our worst enemy. Again, too much water we know can cause tremendous damage. So I look at life's challenges the same way. The challenges I had growing up, they're going to become the worst thing to ever happen to me, or they were going to become the best thing to ever happen to me. No one has ever showed me what the third option is when we have suffering, when we have difficulty. So my goal here is to take the challenge and put it through these 4 dams here. The first dam is we want them to focus their self-talk on what they have control over. We want them to tap into character and heart. We want them to get the heck out of here and tap into here. This means you go through the motions. You don't give up because another person needs you. You need them. A passion, purpose, or interest. And then we want them to get plugged into at least 3 different support systems. So we don't get rid of their problem. We show them how to use that problem as a resource. I'll come back to that in depth. That's really what the resilience focuses on in depth. This is a tribute of tribute to my home state of Maryland. If you put a bunch of live crabs in a pot, if you don't put a lid on the pot, why can't crabs get out of the pot? And the kids will say, well, duh, the other crabs are reaching up and pulling them down. So I'll say, hey, your friends you're skipping school with, you're doing drugs with, fighting with, gang banging, running away, all they're doing is they're pulling you down, they're keeping you in the pot. Then every question that the counselor or the teacher asks the student is written around the visual metaphor. What are the reasons for staying in this pot? This pot, if I'm in a gang, it gives me protection, it gives me money, it gives me prestige, it acts as a surrogate family. What will my future be like when I get out of this pot? Warning, if you try to get out of this pot, you will be attacked. I don't know about you all, but the more good I try to do on planet Earth, the more you will be attacked. We just live in a world where people will pull you down, will attack you, try to keep you in that pot. And so every question, again, the teacher, the counselor talks to the student about is written around the visual metaphor. Then we reinforce it with music that they listen to. And then we have a lot of physical activities, art activities, body kinesthetic activities. I'll say, draw me a picture of what life is like if you stayed in this pot. Draw me a picture of what life would be like if you got out of that pot. Write poetry about that. We even say, create a skit about that. We use as much of the arts as we possibly can to reinforce the social and emotional education we're teaching them here. I'm just going to highlight these other ones real quick because I want to jump right back into the resilience. Now, what I'm sharing with you thus far are skills of resilience, which we spent 25 years teaching these skills of resilience. And then educators kept asking me, Christian, where does the inner motivation come from to get over these hurdles, to tear off these labels, to apply hard work, desire, time, and effort? It takes like 20 minutes to get through this maze. I'll say to the students, to get through this maze, you have to have the desire to do it. You have to put the time in, you have to put the effort in. It's hard work. The other day I was speaking to 2,000 students. I said, what will take you further in life, hard work or being smart? They're like, Mr. Moore, being smart will take me further in America than hard work. And then I'll spend the next hour and a half teaching them that in America, hard work will take you much further than just academic smarts. But these kids have been socialized the opposite of this almost their entire lives. They have to live society's laws and rules. They've got to get plugged into a support system. One of the good things that has come out of COVID is there's no debate anymore that human beings are social creatures, that we need each other. The biggest thing humans need, we know now, is our lives to be observed by other people. When we don't have those support systems, anxiety goes up, depression goes up. We just did a worldwide study on that, what happens when human beings are put into isolation. Again, for years, they would say that's just coming from a bunch of bleeding heart social workers, but now the data more than bears it out. So that's one positive thing that came from COVID. And then the last picture sums it up. Often when we're first working with students, they're standing right here next to this wall. But our goal is, they're standing next to this wall, they're seeing failure, drugs, anger, fighting, different academic problems. They're just dealing with that human condition. But our goal is they learn how to stop crashing, tear off their labels, and so on. They can get on top of that wall and see the answer to the question, why try? They'll have more opportunity, more freedom, more self-respect. And so, again, we reinforce these pictures with music, physical activities, body kinesthetic activities. So again, that's what we spent about 25 years working in over 30,000 schools teaching these social emotional skills. Now, because we're a small group here, and this is really important, this is why I've asked this group of people to come together. I want to share this next thing with you that I'm very, very excited about is, we put so many kids through these 10 visual metaphors. And again, these are the skills of resilience. And I speak at over 100 conferences a year. And educators would say, look, Christian, kids understand your 10 visual metaphors. They like the music, the physical activities. But why is one child motivated to get on top of this wall? Another child, we can have the best physical building, the best teachers in the classroom, the best curriculum, but there's still too many of these kids we're not reaching. Where does the inner motivation come from to be resilient? And again, I spent most of my career working with people who had high trauma and are hurting themselves or others. That's who I work with as a social worker. You're hurting yourself or others. You dealt with an array of trauma growing up or currently, and then my job is to help them, work through that trauma, right? That's my training, that's my education, what it's in. And one day, some different psychologists, social workers started kind of pulling me aside and saying, Christian, why don't you stop and think about the population that has high trauma and is thriving? Now, I don't work with that population as a social worker, people with high trauma and are thriving. And so I started thinking to myself, why don't we pay more attention to that population. I was doing work from, Baltimore to Chicago to LA Unified to Detroit. And I knew that there was lots of these students. Again, mom could be in prison, dad could be an alcoholic. They've dealt with severe abuse, severe violence, major trauma. And this kid would have like a full ride scholarship to Johns Hopkins. Again, I don't work with that population. Most mental health workers don't work with that population. But I wanted to know, what the heck is that population tapping into? And we started seeing 4 things pop up over and over again. Something called relational resilience, street resilience, resource, and rock bottom resilience. So we started looking at tens of thousands of children, again, with high trauma, who were thriving. And again, I want to highlight those 4 sources, but I want to give context to a model. So I wrote the book, The Resilience Breakthrough, based on that. And then we created a model around that. So I hope this doesn't sound a little bit morbid, but if I was going to pass away, tomorrow, and someone said to me, what's the last advice the irony is I did almost pass away a few months ago, but someone said to me, what's the last advice you would give to your 2 kids, Cooper and Carson? I would tell them that the second most powerful thing their dads ever learned is to see my problem as my best friend. I wanted to name my book Resilience, the second greatest principle in the world. And Greenleaf, my publisher, said, Christian, nobody cares what the second greatest principle in the world is. In America, they want to know what the greatest principle in the world is, right? So again, the most powerful thing I've ever learned was when people started showing me how to see the suffering, the opposition is a reason to be kinder, to work harder. I remember you saw the video with the plate with the food wrapped in tinfoil. Mama Jackson would pull over in front of my elementary school. I'd be sitting, in the car, and she'd hand me this food that was warm, just sitting there in this tinfoil. And she'd sit out in front of my elementary school and she'd say, look, Christian, I can't get rid of your parents' mental health issues. I can't get rid of your learning disabilities. I can't get rid of the challenges in this neighborhood. You have every reason to be angry. You have to use that anger as a reason to turn in your homework, to stay in school. She didn't get rid of my problems. She showed me, and again, that's the second most powerful thing I've ever learned, is the ability to see the opposition as a fuel source. So I wanted to name the book, the second greatest principle in the world, resilience. They're like, Christian, nobody cares about that. In America, they want to know the number 1 principle. And I believe the most powerful thing I've ever come across is love. The Beatles got it right when they said, all you need is love. But how do we apply love to resilience? For 25 years, we taught something in Y-Tri called surrendering the one-up relationship, where that means we let a child know they have value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail. And we have over 100 strategies on how, when a child feels down here and they see the adult, maybe it's a probation officer, their teacher, the counselor, they're up here, they see themselves down here. How do we get them on the same page? So we taught something called surrendering the one up, where we just, again, where they know they have value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail. So the relationship's not just predicated on success. It's more of an unconditional approach, because we all know there's 2 types of love. We have conditional love and unconditional love. And we know human beings are much, much more likely to bounce back in an unconditional environment versus a conditional environment. As a business owner, I have to be conditional sometimes. If my employees don't do A, B, or C, I might have to fire them. I might have to let them go, because it's a conditional situation. If you want money, power, status, and control, create conditions. We live in a very conditional world. I'll like you if you have my view, my background, my culture, my belief system. Those are conditions. And the reason why we see that so much in our world, in our society, is because you get instant results creating conditional love. Unconditional love, a human being is much, much more likely to bounce back. One thing I encourage people to do is, write down 5 or 6 people you hang out with. If 3 or more of those people are unconditional, you're going to have less depression, less anxiety. You're more likely to be resilient. You're more likely to put one foot in front of another if more relationships in your life are unconditional versus conditional. And again, if out of 5 relationships, or 3 or more of those are conditional, you're more likely to have more anxiety, more depression, more frustration. So this is very important in the world of resilience. When we started looking at people who had high suffering, high trauma, and were bouncing back, all of them talked about different people in their life that were very unconditional with them. They knew they had tremendous opposition, tremendous challenges. It could be emotional, mental, physical challenges. And they had people around them that we're willing to surrender that one-up relationship to create that unconditional connection. So again, if this was a workshop on success, I would talk to you about conditional love. But this workshop today is not on success. It's on the ability to bounce back. And a human being is 100 times more likely to bounce back in an unconditional environment. So the first thing you have to be resilient is you have to have suffering. The second thing is you want to be around as many people as possible that are unconditional. The third thing that we have found that's really effective in helping people be resilient is, let me pull this up here. I use a metaphor here of a battery. And I started studying, people who had high trauma and what their emotional state was. What is their self-talk? I don't know about you all. When I have opposition or I have suffering, I have negative emotions will kick in, right? So I have a challenge the other day when I got diagnosed with diabetes. I felt fear, I felt frustration. And so I had to figure out, how do I take the fear I'm feeling right now with a chronic illness, and how do I channel that in a way that doesn't hurt my children, that doesn't hurt my wife, that doesn't hurt my employees? How do I take what I'm feeling, I'm hurting? Because we know human beings usually do two things with pain. They take that pain and they hurt other people with that pain, or they take that pain and they try to create love, they try to create healing. And so again, I spent 8 years in college, $65,000 studying something called positive psychology. What we say to ourselves is going to lead to our actions, it's going to lead to our behavior. So we probably want to say positive things to ourselves. Well, I started reading all these biographies of people who had tremendous opposition and were bouncing back, right? I remember one of the first biographies I ever read was Christopher Reeve's biography. Everybody know the story of Christopher Reeves? He played Superman, right? He's the opposite of me, tall, dark, handsome, talented. He's a great rock climber. He's a great actor. He's this Renaissance guy. He's riding horses. Everybody knows the story. He gets thrown off the horse. He's paralyzed. He says to his wife, hey, I'm rock bottom now. I was at the top of the world. Please help me commit suicide. I cannot deal with the pain of this right now. And she negotiates with Christopher and says, look, Christopher, just stay alive for me, for the kids. Let's see if you can make a difference in the paralysis community. And everybody knows the rest of the story. Christopher takes his anger, his pain, his sadness, and really puts it in, channels it into his rehab, and makes a huge difference to the paralysis community. And I'm like, man, he maximized, I'm sure, his positive emotions, also his negative emotions. He created a productive outcome with his negative emotions. I remember reading Nelson Mandela's biography, same thing. He's in a prison camp for 27 years. His main job is breaking up rock. Everybody knows the story. Becomes a president of South Africa and says, look, I'm going to take this anger, this pain. I'm going to take the mistakes I made. I'm going to bring reconciliation. I'm going to bring people together. My favorite story is the prosecuting attorney to seek the death penalty against Mandela. Mandela reaches out to him, invites him to his house after he becomes a president of South Africa, says, look, I messed up. I made huge mistakes. I learned from those mistakes. I'm going to create, reconciliation. I'm going to bring people together. And, at the end of the meeting, the prosecuting attorney who seek the death penalty against Mandela walks out of Mandela's house. The national media there in South Africa says, what do you think of Mandela now? He said, he's the most saintly man I've ever met. That's the power of taking negative emotions and creating a productive outcome with them. Oprah took being physically abused, emotionally abused, sexually abused. She talked about the anger, her rage she felt from that, how she was going to use that to bring people together, to create, more love in the world, to create healing in the world. And I started thinking to myself, wait a minute, there's no law in the universe that says you cannot take a negative emotion and create a productive outcome with it. So how I start to teach this concept to children is I use a metaphor here of a car battery. And I'll say to the kids, can you charge a battery with just a positive connection? They'll say no. I'll say, can you charge a battery with a negative connection? They'll say no. We know the battery charges because of what? The positive and the negative, come together. For example, if me being here right now speaking to you all today was dependent upon these emotions, happiness, peace, motivation, optimism, love, trust, and acceptance, I wouldn't be here speaking to you all today. I'm here speaking to you all today because, again, Mama Jackson, some incredible mentors, they showed me how to create a productive outcome with my anger, my fear, my guilt, sadness, loneliness, depression, anxiety. Again, this is going to literally say this. I was talking to my wife the other day. She's like, are you serious, Christian? You are literally going to put this, you want this on your tombstone? I said, yes. There's no law in the universe that says you cannot take the negative emotions on the right and create a productive outcome with them. It's the most powerful thing anybody's ever showed me. And again, you guys, I went to one of the top mental health schools in this country. I was trained by the top mental health therapists in this country, and they pretty much only taught me positive self-talk, cognitive positive self-talk. And when I got into the real world of work and I started working with families that have trauma, who are dealing with crisis, they all have negative emotions. We're only going to get so far in the change process if they don't know how to maximize both the positive and negative emotions. So what we realize today in psychology is all emotion is energy. We're becoming less and less concerned whether an emotion is positive or negative. What we care about it is, can we create a productive outcome, whether the emotion is positive or negative? This is one of the reasons why you're seeing mindfulness explode throughout the world, because mindfulness is the ability to observe your emotions, right? Whether they're positive or negative, they're like clouds. You're just watching these clouds go by. And some of the emotions, we have 40 to 60,000 different emotions during the day. Some of those emotions are going to be positive. Some of those emotions are going to be negative. One of the biggest breakthroughs in the human condition is the ability to just observe the emotion, whether it's positive or negative, and not react, to just observe it and say, okay, wow, I could even use the emotion, whether it's positive or negative, in productive ways. If you think about it, if you have to wait for positive emotions to show up before you're resilient, before you put one foot in front of another, you're actually at a major resilience disadvantage. You have twice the fuel source to bounce back if you can tap into both your positive and negative emotions. I was teaching this right before COVID by the University of Iowa. There was a bunch of professors there in the humanities department, and they heard me talking about this battery, and they said, Christian, you don't even understand your own battery. I go, what do you mean? They go, do you realize that the greatest films, the greatest music, the greatest art, the greatest comedy, the greatest things that we celebrate human beings over is them taking negative emotions and creating a productive outcome with it? You look at the film Les Mis, the play Les Mis, Wicked. Picasso took the War of Spain. He saw all these countrymen being killed in the War of Spain. He channeled it into that really famous artwork with the kind of the horses that, oh my gosh, Kearney. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I apologize. I don't remember the name of it. It's worth like $1 billion, this artwork. But what makes human beings special is the ability to take suffering, to take pain, and create a productive outcome with it. Hemingway took heartbreak. During World War I, he falls in love with this nurse, never sees her again, and is just heartbroken. He channels his heartbreak into his writing, which becomes some of the most famous writing, heartfelt writing in human history. And anyway, so when I was there talking to the professor in the humanities department, it was just fascinating to hear them emphasize to me. They go, Christian, it's actually what makes us human. If we didn't have negative emotions, if we didn't mess up, if we didn't make mistakes, we would literally be a robot. We would be a machine. You could literally argue it's the birthplace of humanity. It's what's most special about us, is that we mess up, we make mistakes. It's interesting. As I was learning this, I had already learned in the world of resilience that the number one thing that kills our resilience is if we can't forgive ourselves. If we mess up, we make mistakes. If our head hits the pillow at night and we focus on what's wrong with ourselves, we're less likely to bounce back, to put one foot in front of another. So, to be vulnerable, to the ability to see both our positive emotions and our negative emotions as a fuel source gives us twice the fuel to bounce back. So we're teaching kids by 3rd grade, and we even tell kids, well, we're about to teach you. Most adults do not know how to do this. Most adults do not see their problem as their best friend. They don't see their negative emotions as a resource. So we're teaching kids by 3rd grade, the minute they feel sad, angry, nervous, lonely, depressed, that they can literally create a productive outcome with that. They can use those emotions as a reason to turn in their homework, to stay in school, to walk away from the gang, to walk away from the fight. So if this is a model, the first thing we do to help children be resilient, the first thing we want them to do is see the suffering, see the opposition as an opportunity, right? The second thing we want them to do is flip the switch. We want them to say to themselves, How do I use this suffering? How do I use this opposition as my best friend? All of us have this switch inside of us that we can flip, but it starts with a question. Nobody is resilient until they say to themselves, how do I use this suffering? How do I use this pain as a fuel source? That's what we call the flip the switch question. That's the gateway to resilience. And then we want them to maximize both their positive and negative emotions. Remember, you have twice the fuel source to bounce back if you can maximize both your positive and negative emotions. And the fact that you mess up, you have negative emotions, that's literally what's most special about a human being. That's what makes you human. Brene Brown is screaming about this. It's the #1 downloaded TED Talk right now on vulnerability. It's literally what makes us human. It's how we connect with other human beings. We know one of the biggest things that increases our resilience is relationships. We only get close to other people through being authentic, through being vulnerable, through being real, through being transparent. Now we got to be careful who we share stuff with. We have to have boundaries. I'm a therapist, I'm aware, but we know humans are highly, highly resilient as if they can maximize both their positive and negative emotions. You have twice the fuel source to bounce back if you have the ability to do that. So it's one thing for me to tell a child, I want you to maximize both your positive and negative emotions, but where does the inner motivation come from to do that? And that's the 4 sources of resilience. That's when all these educators started saying to me, Christian, where does the inner motivation come from? Why try is the skills of resilience. And I can teach the skills all day long, but does the child have the inner motivation? Does the student have the inner motivation to stop crashing, to tear off those labels? So this is where the 4 sources of resilience come in. This is literally a prescription for resilience. I've spent the last 25 years attending over 100 conferences a year. If someone said to me, they're going to show me where resilience comes from inside, where resilience is born, I would have turned on every recording device and sprinted to the front of the room. So I promise if you don't hear anything else in the last 10 minutes here, I want to highlight these 4 sources of resilience, because this is where resilience comes from internally. So I promise I saved the best, the most important for last here. So the first place that resilience comes from internally is something called relational resilience. This should not shock anybody. Here's a picture of my 2 boys, Cooper and Carson. If I never ever got invited to speak again, I would literally go work at 4 fast food restaurants because they need me, I need them. It's that interdependence we know is the birthplace of resilience. So that means your greatest motivation to not give up is the knowledge that others need you and you need them. One of the amazing things we've seen from the research with COVID is also, to add to that, is all human beings need another human being to observe our life. In a few minutes, I'm going to go home. I'm going to see my wife, Wendy. I've been married to for 30 years. And I'm going to say, man, Wendy, this is how the webinar went today. We had some incredible people showed up. So I'm going to bond. It's her observing what I experienced today. That is one of the greatest human needs all human beings have, is to be observed by another human being. And when we're not observed, we feel more depression, more anxiety, more fear. We have a massive desire to be seen and to be heard, to have a voice, to literally be seen and heard. You draw strength from the emotional support of others. Your greatest power comes from human connection. Mama Jackson was that relationship for me. And one of my favorite examples is Rick and Dick Hoyt, who ran in over 240 triathlons together. When he became the legs for his son, it completely transformed his life. If I had more time, I'd show you a little video clip. But this is the highlight of the video clip. He literally says, something comes from his body to my body that motivated me. And today we know exactly what that is. That's relational resilience. You do not have to be born with these 4 sources of resilience. We can literally teach them. I remember I was in graduate school. I learned about, they did a 20-year longitudinal study in Kauai called the Kauai Resilience Project. They wanted to know 2 kids grew up in the same home, the same neighborhood, the same background. One kid makes it out, the other kid doesn't make it. What's the X factor? I saw this in my own family. I have a sister that's homeless right now. I have an older brother who spent time in prison. We grew up in the same home, same neighborhood, same background. Why was I able to make it out, become a national advocate? And some of my other siblings didn't make it. What's the X factor? And they found the X factor in this 20-year longitudinal study was the ability to see your problem as your best friend. But I remember my professors saying to me in graduate school, you can't hand someone a prescription for resilience. Now, it took us 25 years, but I'm gonna say something pretty bold. Absolutely, you can hand someone a prescription for resilience. They have to know how to maximize both their positive and negative emotions. They have to be able to flip that switch, and then they have to be able to tap into that relational resilience. They have to have 3 or more relationships where someone needs them and they need that other person. We need at least 3 of those relationships. One of my favorite examples of relational resilience is Harriet Tubman. We know she freed over 200 slaves on the Underground Railroad. The slaves would want to turn back around. They would hear the dogs coming towards them to the woods. They would see the lights coming towards them. I went to her museum before COVID, and she was in my Maryland history books growing up, but they never told me the real story. The real story was Harriet Tubman had a shotgun, and she'd explain to them, if you turn around, we're all going to get captured. So you got to keep walking with me. And none of the slaves turned around for some reason. They kept walking with her, because why did she go to that extreme? She knew at what level they needed her, and she needed them. She's also the grandmother of my profession. Jane Addams is the mother of social work, who started the Whole Houses in Chicago. But Harriet Tubman started the first retirement home for African Americans in Philadelphia and did some of the first organized social work. So this is the grandmother of social work. Jane Addams is the mother of social work. You'll see soldiers coming home from war. They maybe lost an arm, a leg, a limb. I've sat next to many of these guys on flights, and oftentimes they'll say to me, if they could go back, they would absolutely go back. And none of them say they want to go back because of politics. All of them say they want to go back because of love, is camaraderie with their fellow soldiers. The other day, I was sitting next to a 4-star general on a flight, and I was talking to him about these 4 sources of resilience. And he said to me something interesting. He said, this is the #1 goal of boot camp. He said, we know if that emotional interdependence is there, they're 100 times more likely to follow through on the battlefield. And he said, this is the #1 motivator. I remember just sitting there kind of arguing. I said, it's interesting. The US Army has known this for almost 200 years, is the #1 X factor to motivate, but we haven't made sure every child in our public school system has access to relational resilience, when we know it is the biggest X factor that really motivates someone to grind, to put one foot in front of another. So the second place resilience comes from internally, within. Now, I read lots of books on resilience. They would only tell me the attributes of resilience: hard work, determination, perseverance. But I wanted to know, where does resilience come from inside? So again, the first place is that relational resilience. The second place resilience comes from internally is something called street resilience. And man, if you turn on your TV right now, you will see street resilience coming through the roof. And that's where you take the pain of disrespect, social inequality, and mistakes, and use it as fuel to propel you forward. Human beings will disrespect each other over height, weight, shoe size, skin color, belief system, culture, background. Human beings have a tremendous desire to go, I'm up here, you're down here. This is why I'm more superior to you. And the ability, when we started looking at tens of thousands of kids who had high trauma and were bouncing back, all of them talked about relational resilience. All of them talked about feeling disrespected. They were the first one in their family to go to college, the first generation college student. They were told they couldn't do A, B, or C, and they used that as the motivation to graduate from high school, to get into this university, to knock these doors down, to become a great entrepreneur. All of them talked about inequality they dealt with, disrespect, whatever that, that disrespect was. They flipped that. They used the hate as a fuel source. It's interesting. I just, on my way in here to the office, I was listening to the radio and I was thinking about street resilience, because they said that, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is literally the most respected world leader right now. And they were talking about, his street resilience. They were just giving a discourse I was listening to here a few minutes ago on NPR. They were talking about how he's created a productive outcome with tremendous opposition, tremendous disrespect. He needs, he wants more help, more resources, but he's, you see what's happening in Ukraine. That is the highest level street resilience possible. I mean, that sums up what I'm trying to say far better than I can say it. You convert the pain into the energy to create productive outcomes. You direct your hurt and anger towards a cause rather than an individual. We're definitely seeing that in the Ukraine. You have the ability to reframe your limitations and you transform them into strengths. We're definitely seeing that in the Ukraine. You know, Mandela, I just talked about a few minutes ago, powerful example of street resilience, what he did with that disrespect. Rosa Parks refusing to sit on the back of the bus, powerful example. You know, I had the professor who came to me in college and he said, Christian, if you get a college degree, my degree is worth less. I literally walked off that campus in tears. About, I don't know, 9-10 years later, I found out that professor is teaching out of 2 college textbooks. The Why Tries in Introduction to School Social Work textbook is evidence-based RTI, PBIS. So he actually has to lecture on my theories now. Now you might say, Christian, you're being a little arrogant right now. You're being a little bit cocky. No, I'm not. I'm being street resilient. You told me I'm not even good enough to be on this college campus. Now I'm in the college textbooks. I have value. That's street resilience, is to use disrespect. People focused on what's wrong with you as a reason to become more loving, more kind, to work harder. There's always going to be haters on planet Earth. And the ability to use that as a fuel source, we saw over and over again in people who had high trauma and were thriving. You know, Abraham Lincoln running for public office 7 times and failing. Everybody knows the rest of that story. You know, his own cabinet called him a buffoon, ignorant, uneducated. I went to his presidential library there in Springfield, Illinois, a couple of years ago. And when you go into his library, you walk down this long hallway, and above your head are these speakers, and you're just hearing these horrible attacks on Lincoln. When you get to the end of the hallway, it says, everybody you just heard talking, those are the people he put in his cabinet. And then he surrounded himself with people who would tell him the opposite of what he wanted to hear, because he knew a great leader had to get different type of feedback. They couldn't just have someone telling them what they could only agree with. And we see what happens in the world when that happens is very, very dangerous. I thought that was really powerful in Lincoln's story. Just a powerful example of street resilience. And then the third place that resilience comes from, I'll give you a Reader's Digest version. In the book, we have 27 strategies on how to develop your relational resilience, your street resilience, your resource and rock bottom. So the book is for the adults. And then we created a curriculum, just like Why Try, around the 4 sources of resilience here. So the third place the resilience comes from within, I'm going to pull it up here, is resource resilience. And that's where you maximize your talents, your abilities, the resources you have to be resilient. Like this guy's fishing on this river here. He didn't put the river there. He's accessing a resource, you know, his fly rod, his waders. He has a resource to catch those fish. You know, growing up, I had 2 skills. I could talk nonstop and I could draw really good. Today, I make a living through nonstop speaking. You know, in Maryland, they had corporal punishment. They would beat me with a wood paddle for my nonstop speaking. And then I took everything in mental health and made it visual. So they told me you can't make a living as an artist. Social workers make no money. So I combined social work, art, and mental health and brought all those things together. And that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years. But that's resource resilience. All any of us can do is maximize the resources available to us. I want to pull up here. Actually, let me go back here real quick. I'm going to highlight one other thing and I'll be done here. Let me just pull up this guy right here. His name's Kyle Maynard. He was born with no arms, no legs. Greatest example of resource resilience that I've seen in a long time. He wrestled in high school and college. He recently put rubber balls on the end of his stubs. Remember, he was born with no arms, no legs. And he put rubber balls on the end of his stubs and crawled to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. All any of us can do is maximize the resources we have in the reality of where we're standing. It's interesting. Resilience takes place in the effort effect. Resilience takes place in the striving. There's not a destination. You don't reach resilience. I've never reached resilience. I've been resilient, again, by putting one foot in front of another when I have every reason to shut down. Resilience is showing up and pushing through. It's not a destination. It's not a landing spot. Resilience takes place in the effort effect, in the movement, in the not shutting down when you have every reason to shut down. So I think one of the big misconceptions of resilience is that you land on resilience. You never land on it. It's never an end point. It's a movement point. You're always just, again, putting one foot in front of another. And then the last place the resilience comes from is rock bottom resilience. And that's when you have every reason to give up again, you flip that switch. You say to yourself, how do I use the suffering? How do I use this opposition as my best friend? I want to end with, this is a famous picture during the Great Depression, this famous Dorothy Lang picture. 6 months after that picture was taken on the right there, they still might be living in that tent. Those kids still might be hungry. But if you look at mom's face, she is not going on shutdown. That's rock bottom resilience. And again, I don't even have words in the English language to describe, the look on her face right there. Now, I know this is a really fast Reader's Digest version of those 4 sources of resilience, but Jake, his number one job is to get these resources, to get resilience to the communities where you live there in the Northwest. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Jake to talk a little bit about ways we could connect. And I told Jake, if you all do a webinar, I don't do this very often, but again, I love your part of the country and I love traveling there. So I told Jake, if he does if y'all set up a webinar with him or connect with him, I will literally give you guys a signed copy of the book. Don't tell anybody else that, but we're going to do that for this group right here. And we'll give you guys a signed copy if you do that with him. And I just want to thank you guys for devoting your lives to reaching so many students like me. If I got access to evidence-based resilience in my own children, and we're seeing literally right now, hundreds of thousands of kids getting access to evidence-based resilience. And you don't have to be born with resilience. We can literally teach a child how to tap into both their positive and negative emotions. We can teach a student how to tap into relational resilience, street resilience, resource, and rock bottom resilience. And I believe that's going to be one of the biggest social justice challenges in the next 20 years, as millions and millions of kids are going to get access to evidence-based resilience. And many kids aren't. And that's my fight. That's why I need some other soldiers. I need people to help me get this message out so that all kids get access to evidence-based resilience. My story is not special. Again, resilience was delivered to me on a silver platter. I definitely have a massive debt to pay to make sure every student gets access to resilience. It is the great equalizer. Thank you all for your time. You're my heroes. Thank you. Thank you. And here's Jake.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here to really just kind of close us out today for the last 5 minutes or so. I just want to share real quick some stuff with you. Let me open this up. Give me just one moment here. Okay, so this is the actual Why Try toolkit. So when Christian talks about, sharing resilience with students, teaching students resilience, we actually have a few different ways that we do that here at Why Try. And one of those ways is using the Why Try curriculum. It's been around for 22 years. It's a K through 12 curriculum. We actually even use it in adult corrections. We're constantly updating it. What we do with Why Try is teach those skills of resilience that Christian mentioned at the beginning of his presentation. And those skills of resilience are vital for all students. We're implemented in tiers 1 through 3, and we really use this to engage with students and to teach them in ways that they're familiar with and ways that they like to be taught. And so we have 10 learning units within Why Try. We have lesson tools, multimedia, multi-sensory resources to engage students, and then just some different ways to implement toolkits like this with fidelity. We also offer a resilience for youth curriculum. This is a toolkit similar to Why Try, where we're discussing the sources of resilience, that rock bottom, relational, street, and resource resilience that Christian was discussing, as well as that battery, flipping the switch. How do we introduce and discuss resilience with students, as well as, again, a multi-sensory, multimedia approach in engaging students. We also offer staff developments for creating relationships, cultivating a positive school climate and culture. This is an administrator toolkit that you as administrators or your administrators that you work with can utilize. There's 9 different workshops in here that can be used throughout the year to just talk about building relationships with students, building a positive culture within your school. How do we navigate some trauma-informed environments? How do we pay special attention to the kids who really need it? So those are really 3 of our toolkits that we utilize to help cultivate again a culture of resilience, resilience education, and social emotional learning. The last thing, we're going to give this to you as a gift today, for being here. This is our parent guide to resilience. This is just a way to cultivate a lot of the things that Christian has shared today in the homes of our students and with their families. This is a chapter book. It reads as an audio book. It's in both English and Spanish. There's activities in here, there's videos that you can utilize. This has been a great resource that we developed right before the pandemic, and we've seen some tremendous success with it. So you'll have total access to this. As Christian mentioned, if you book a demo with me, you can receive a signed copy of Christian's book, The Resilience Breakthrough. So I'm more than happy to get something like that set up. If you can email me, jake@ytri.org. You can email into info@ytri.org to get any help, to get any questions answered at any time. But a lot of you are current users of YTRI or Resilience for Youth. If you want other people to see this, we're going to send this recording out so you can share it with your teams. If you want a demo on any of the toolkits that I showed you, please feel free to reach out. We'll send you sample lessons, as well as that parent guide to resilience as well. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll get all that information out to you. We'll stay on here for a little bit to look at the chat window. If you have any questions, feel free to just type that here in the chat, or turn your camera on, talk to us. We'll stick around here for about 5 or so minutes. But again, thank you, and we'll do something similar soon.
Yeah, Jay, I'm willing to answer questions. I can be on for a few minutes too with you if you want. I don't usually have to jet, but I got a few minutes here, so I'll be more than happy to answer questions if anything we can do to help you guys.
Awesome.
By the way, check out we have a webinar series we were just on with Bill Milliken from Communities in Schools. We have incredible, if you go to our website, ytri.org, you'll see our webinar series. We have education leaders across the country coming on there, just giving free resources and ideas. And then we have check out the Resilience Breakthrough podcast. We have a podcast there that we're getting really good response on. So please check that out as well. And yeah, any questions, go ahead and put in the window or unmute yourself and we'll answer any questions or support you need.
Jake, you'll send me quotes for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Since you're sending me a dozen other ones, might as well just include that one.
There we go. That's right.
Jeff, you're a very good student. You're focused. I was impressed. I kept looking at you when I was nervous. It was nice to have someone engaged. What do you do, Jeff, and where are you located?
I'm in Tulare County. We're actually coming out there, Casey and myself, and we have 2 other staff that are coming out to Salt Lake next month to get some expert training from your team. So we're really excited. Yeah, I took like 8 pages of notes.
You have a great county. I'm trying to remember. I think you're director of special ed there.
No. I just do. I'm called a facilitator, whatever that is. Okay. Casey's the specialist. He's the man. We work with kids all over the county. We like to work with. We have low socioeconomics, and we have a lot of kids that need resilience work.
Is Casey at the district level, or are you with at a school?
We're both county office of ed.
County office there, and okay, all right.
Yeah. Cool. So then what we do is we go out throughout the county with multiple districts.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for what you're doing.
Jeff's the man. Tulare County, they have it figured out.
Yeah. No,
yes, he is.
You guys got some great.
We got a plan. We're starting next year. 3rd graders. It's gonna be fun.
Yep. And those, I see several people saying in the chat window they want to share the recording. So yeah, please pass the recording on to other administrators, other people that you think would be important to see. I see several people saying that. So yeah, that would be awesome. I also want to say hi to my friend Miss Barnes there in the house there. She's a tremendous child advocate. Say hi to my friend. I used her, she's my therapist the other day. So she's an awesome human being. And so if you have a question, she could probably answer this stuff as good as anybody. She's an incredible educator over the years and counselor. She's amazing.
Totally.
You guys have a great day.
Hey, you too, Jeff. Take care.
Just
Take
take
care,
time with us.
Casey.
fellas.
Thanks
Thank
for
you, fellas.
jumping on with us. Look forward to seeing you guys.
Sir.
Present to our
Cindy,
board.
I'll send you a bunch of information, that you can share with your team. I'm also happy to do just like a quick 30-40 minute presentation if that would be helpful of some of the materials, some of the visuals, and just kind of give some insight on our approach. But I'll send some documents your way, absolutely, to help out with that if it would be helpful. Awesome. Again, thank you everybody for being on here. I'm going to jump off. Christian, if you want to stay on for a little bit, feel free, but I'm going to hop off here. Thank you guys again. For those of you who are still on here, if you have questions, ask away. Feel free to turn on your mics, and I'm sure Christian will be happy to help.
Yeah, I could be on for about 3 or 4 more minutes if anybody has any